Hi 10th graders, welcome to your first video about science fiction. As you know, we're in our short story unit right now, and we are about to start reading some science fiction short stories. So today your learning objective is that you're going to be able to define the genre of science fiction and identify at least 3 key elements of this genre. So think about the story that we just finished reading in English 12. We read the play A Raisin in the Sun, and this is an example of historical fiction. Remember, the play was set in the 1950s in Chicago, and it really told us the story of a Black family living in the 50s. Historical fiction is a story set in a specific time period. It's a made-up story, but it could have happened to real people, right? And these stories are meant to represent a specific moment in history. Now that we've read a story that was set in the past, we are going to completely shift gears and start thinking about the future. So what about the future? When you think about the future, what do you imagine it looking like? What do you think is going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years? When you are an adult, what is our world going to look like? Are there going to be aliens or space travel or robots or time travel or advanced technology? Think about our cell phones. Like, they seem to change almost every day. At least every year we get a new model and things advance. How is that going to change in our lifetime? The genre of science fiction imagines what the future is going to look like. So these stories kind of dream up what the world could look like in the future. There are a bunch of key features of science fiction. So as I list off a bunch of these, make sure you get some of them down in your notes. One key feature is time travel and teleportation, mind control, aliens and mutants, space travel and space exploration, interplanet warfare, so people and beings on different planets fighting with each other, fictional or imagined worlds, speculative technology. That's what I was just talking about, like imagining how technology might advance in the future. And then super intelligent robots and computers. These are all key features of the science fiction genre. So we are going to watch a short clip from the opening scene of the movie Star Wars. You might have heard of Star Wars. It is one of the most famous examples of science fiction. As we watch, I want you to observe what sci-fi element do you notice in the opening shot of this movie? All right, that was it. Just a very short clip. Let's go back to the key features of science fiction. Which of these did you notice in the Star Wars movie? If you said space travel and space exploration, you are exactly right. That is the feature that I noticed in this Star Wars movie here. Let's skip ahead. All right, so as we look at these science fiction stories, we are going to be looking at a couple guiding questions. The first one is, what does this future look like? The second is, who gets to be a part of that future? So thinking about, what do the characters look like, who is represented? And then who gets to write about it? So we're actually going to look at who are the authors of these stories. Going back to our example of Star Wars, this is one of the most iconic examples of science fiction. It originally came out in 1977, but there are still new Star Wars movies being released today. If we look at our guiding questions, the first one is, what does this future look like? In Star Wars, the future, as you saw, it's set in this dark galaxy. There are multiple sides fighting to control the galaxy, and they're trying to free it. The good guys are trying to free everyone, right, from the bad guys. Our second question is, who gets to be a part of it? So that's where we have to actually look at these characters. These are the main characters in the Star Wars movies. So the franchise has all these different characters that are aliens, different types of people, but the original movies, all the 6 main characters were white actors, white individuals. In the newest Star Wars that was released in 2015, This was the first time that the main character, the main hero, was a woman, and there were 2 main characters who were people of color. But as you can see, for the most part, this is a pretty white group of characters. In terms of the writers, there's a study that looked at who was writing the stories of Star Wars. 96% of Star Wars movie writers have been men, and 100% of these writers have been white. So we can start to see that science fiction is a genre that has been written by and about mainly white characters and mainly men. So a lot of people have actually been really interested in this question of like, who is represented in science fiction stories? This is a poster with a bunch of statistics about representation in science fiction films. So let's look at some of these statistics. This says that only 14% of science fiction movies had a female protagonist. That means a woman was the main character. That's not a very high percentage. 0% of these movies had a main character that was LGBTQ. So that means like a lesbian character or a bisexual character or a gay character. No movies had a main character with a queer main character. Only 8% of these movies had a main character that was a person of color. That means 92% of the science fiction movies had main characters that were white. And 0% of those main characters that were people of color were women of color. So you're probably noticing that there's a lack of diversity, a lack of representation in science fiction stories. I want you to think about, are these statistics at all surprising to you? What stands out about them? Whose voices are we hearing in these stories and whose voices are left out? In our next video, we're actually going to talk about what some people are doing to combat this lack of diversity, but this is all for your video on science fiction. So you are ready to take your mastery check. If you feel like you can successfully identify the genre of science fiction, if you can name at least 3 key features of this genre, and if you feel like you can reflect on representation in the genre of science fiction. So take a second to think, how well did you understand this video? Is there anything you need to go back and rewatch or review in your notes? And let me know if you have any questions before you take your mastery check.